Good morning. This is your Barbados Today news update for Friday, June 1. So glad you can join us. I'm Fernella Wedderburn. Our top story at this hour, 1 week after it was elected to office, the Mia Mottley-led Barbados Labour Party has suffered its first casualty. In a press release last night, Prime Minister Mottley said she was informed by way of letter from Bishop Joseph Atherley, Member of Parliament for St. Michael West, of his intention to serve in opposition to the BLP government. This was further confirmed by a letter from Governor-General Dame Sandra Mason. The development follows the naming of Mottley's 30-member cabinet last week, with Atherley being an obvious omission. Meantime, elected six-time St. George North MP Glenn Clark declares he won't be crossing the floor of Parliament. His comments come amid bitter complaints raised by his constituents that he was not handed a portfolio in the new Mia Mottley-led administration. In an interview with Barbados Today, Clark admitted that some of his constituents have voiced their dissatisfaction, but he made it clear that he was elected a parliamentarian and not a minister. Clark, who insisted he had no intention of going against his party, however admitted that it would have been good to be a minister. He said it was up to the Prime Minister to appoint ministers, and while he had no such offer, he is prepared to lend his expertise where needed. Clark also maintained that his number one priority is to serve his constituents. Meanwhile, prominent economist Avinash Prasad is a member of the government's new economic team. Though tight-lipped on his new role, Prasad confirmed the news and told Barbados Today the expert team has been selected and work has already begun to turn around the ailing Barbados economy. There is still no word from the Democratic Labour Party on whether it will accept the government's offer to take up 2 seats in the new Senate. Attorney General Dale Marshall says the government is still moving ahead with plans to make the necessary amendments to the Constitution to allow the Governor-General to make the appointments. The DLP, which was whitewashed in the May 24 election, is divided over the move. But Marshall is confident the party will get on board.
I rather suspect they'll probably accept it.
I just wonder if there's a time frame.
Well, we want it done with dispatch, and that's why we're moving to make both sets of amendments to the Constitution on Tuesday. Then the Senate would meet on Wednesday, and we anticipate that, if not prior to the Senate sitting on, well, the logistics of it will have to work out, but certainly we expect that the Governor-General will be in a position or clothed with legal authority to do what we're hoping she will very shortly.
In other news, this Friday, a dire warning that the Barbados government could have another sewage crisis on its hands if it fails to take immediate action to correct nagging problems at the Bridgetown sewage treatment plant. General Manager of the Barbados Water Authority, Keith Roy Halliday, sounded the warning at yesterday's post-cabinet briefing at government headquarters. He said that the short-term measures to tackle some of the problems at the plant have overtaxed the system and prompt intervention is urgently needed.
What we've discovered is that the equipment there is beginning to fail, and it is beginning to fail significantly. One of our tanks, in essence, is not working at the moment. The other one, which contains the digester and other equipment, is beginning to fail. The funding requirement is actually pretty significant, and while we have not yet placed it before the cabinet or ministers, we're looking at least $12 million to try to rehabilitate the Bridgetown sewage plant in its most basic sense. This does not yet allow us to address some of the other issues where we had a fire, the staff room that needs rehabilitating, and some of the other ancillary works that needs to be done. This does not allow us to carry the system fully back into what we'll call a secondary state. This is just to make sure that the system doesn't collapse around us.
Halliday pointed out that the BWA is in need of an additional $12 million to restore the system and to prevent a collapse.
So we are quite concerned with the Bridgetown sewage treatment plant. It's been hobbling along for some time. We know that. We have quietly expressed it at times. We have shouted it at other times. But we're at the point where if we do not take immediate action, if we do not apply immediate resources, we will have a significant problem in 2 to 4 weeks' time.
Neglect is still the #1 form of child abuse in Barbados. This grim revelation from Senior Child Care Officer at the Child Care Board, Melvina Waith, as she addressed a media sensitization workshop at the Accra Beach Hotel yesterday on ethical guidelines for reporting on children. Armed with statistics, Waith revealed that the island still has a long way to go to eradicate child abuse.
Over the past 5 years, the board continues to register over 1,000 cases of child abuse annually. And of these, 50% or more are cases of neglect. The 5 to 11 age category continue to register the highest incidence of neglect. Again, these have been over 50% over the past several years. In the year 2017, we registered 547 cases of neglect over the 1,004 reported cases of child abuse. The 12 to 16 category registers the highest level of sexual abuse. Females, as we know, are the highest number of victims of sexual abuse. Abandonment remains our lowest category of child abuse.
There's regional and international news after this short break.
Barbados Today, news you can trust.
To regional news, Caribbean governments have reached out to the region's premier financial institution for help to address a range of social, economic, and environmental concerns. As the 48th Annual Board of Governors meeting of the Caribbean Development Bank wrapped up in St. George's yesterday, Chairman of the Board of Governors, Grenadia's Prime Minister, Dr. Keith Mitchell, said that since the meeting identified air transport, the development of the blue economy, and building resilience as the main priorities for the region, an action plan was needed to guide the process.
I therefore encourage my brother President Smith and his staff to develop an action agenda that takes on board the relevant policy recommendations emanating from all these 3 seminars for discussions and approval at the level of heads of government of CARICOM. In closing, I want to remind you that our Caribbean history is one of struggle and triumph. Our foreparents and the generations that followed up until this present day have had to be resilient in many forms. In other words, resilience existed a long time ago. Resilience is etched in our DNAs, and as such, innately, we as a Caribbean people have the basics of what is required to push ahead in a sustainable way.
And finally, the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says his government will retaliate against a decision by the U.S. government to impose harsh import taxes on steel and aluminum from EU, Canada, and Mexico.
The American administration has made a decision today that we deplore and obviously is going to lead to retaliatory measures, as it must, but we regret that. We would much rather move together in partnership, understanding that no 2 countries have economies as interwoven and mutually beneficial as Canada and the United States.
And on that note, we come to the end of our news, but for the very latest, visit our website at www.barbadostoday.bb. You can also subscribe to our e-paper, email updates, and like us on Facebook. And you can sign up for our breaking news alert also via WhatsApp. We're also on Izumi Media and bus terminals or screenplay at supermarkets and gas stations near you. And don't forget to tune in to Mix 96.9 FM for the very latest. I'm Fernella Wedderburn. Good morning.